This will be a quick comparison video between a fuel pump and the same fuel pump, but with the combination of a vacuum pump. So this is basically 2-in-1. This actually happens to be for the 1963 Rambler American, but the general concept here applies to any car. I got these from eBay, and they're both new or rebuilt. They're in excellent shape. So starting from this one on the left here, these were at a good price, and looks like there's a lot of them. So I decided to get two and just keep this little one as a spare. So this one is strictly a fuel pump. So it's smaller, and I prefer this part here to be glass, but I guess the steel is good. It's made of aluminum. Not much to say about it. It's a Carter. I think that's the number for it there, the part number, 1652. Or that might be it there, 3731S. I think that's it there. And this one, it just pumps fuel. It's just two bolts that hold it onto the engine, and the camshaft moves this lever here, like so. And you can hear that kind of, this one makes like a clicking, almost like a clicking sound. As you can see. And the way you can test it, it's very simple. It's hard to do it with one hand. But you just move the lever here, and it should make a pumping noise. And if you put your finger over the out entrance, you should feel some pressure develop. And once you take your finger off, it should go like pff. It should make that sound from the air escaping. Or if you put it on the other side, on the inside, and it actually says they're very easy to install. Again, this is something that you got to appreciate about these older parts. It actually says they're out, and it says in right there. There's no way you can mess this around unless you're drunk. So it's very easy to install, and very easy to test. It wasn't too expensive either. I always like to get these painted before installing them, but this one is just going to be a spare. If you watched my previous video, I had one of these, but I guess it broke off. There's something wrong with it, and so I had a spare one of these, but without the vacuum pump. So it was just a fuel pump. And what the vacuum pump does is it boosts the vacuum from the engine. So the engine is like a giant vacuum cleaner. I hope I'm not repeating myself here, but just in case, I'll just go over it. And the way the wipers work on the Rambler is that it uses the wipers have a vacuum motor, so it actually uses that sucking from the engine to move the wipers. I think you did have the option of getting the electrical wipers too. I think the vacuum was a standard. You might have had to pay a bit more for the electrical. I'm not sure, but anyways, so when they first started out, and with the car with just the fuel pump, you just have a pipe coming from the intake manifold on the engine going straight to the wipers. So just plain and simple, just vacuum. It got its vacuum right from the engine. Now the problem with that is that the engine loses vacuum. The vacuum decreases to maybe almost zero or even zero during acceleration. So as soon as you hit the accelerator pedal, your wipers would stop working, or they wouldn't work too well. So that was kind of bad. But at the same time, I said this before, I guess you could look at it as a bit of a safety mechanism in a way that, if your wipers stop working, then you're forced to not go very fast during the rain. So, but like I said, it was just for a split second, so it wasn't a big deal. But I guess it's not very nice. So they came out with this vacuum pump. Now, the vacuum pumps are very common on diesel trucks too, because diesel trucks and cars, they do not have any vacuum. So some of them will have the external vacuum pump, buses too. But here, with this pump, it actually has the vacuum pump with it. So it's a 2-in-1. So at the same time that the engine is pumping the fuel, it's also getting the vacuum from the engine. So it doesn't produce vacuum. It's not really a vacuum pump. It's actually more correctly called a vacuum booster. So you have the vacuum from the engine goes into here, and then it goes out to the wipers over here. Again, you can't miss it. It says wiper right there, out and in. It's not threaded on both sides, but it looks like it could be. So I'm not too sure why they make that. So as you can see, on the other side, it's not threaded, it's just a plugged hole. So as you can see, the other reason why I bought this one is because if you watched my previous video on the fuel pumps, the one that I have on the car now, it's this shaft here, is made by just 3 pieces of steel stacked together and riveted together. So they're narrow, which I don't like. The manual the old one, it actually had a brass or a bronze bushing here that would actually move slightly. And brass, or rather bronze being a softer metal, it ensured that there was no friction to the camshaft. So no scratching of it. Now the other one, the one that I have in now, just being the 3 narrow pieces of, I think it's probably 1/8 thick steel, them being narrow and being made out of steel, I don't like that because it's a lot more friction. And I took it out and it looked fine, so because there's always oil going into it, so it should be fine, but this here should be much better. So this one it doesn't have the bronze bushing, but it's a lot wider. And this just seems to me like it's a bit more heavy duty than the other one. And it was cheap, so I'm going to keep it as a spare. So now I've got 4 fuel pumps. I admit, guys, that going on eBay is almost like it's like Christmas time for me here. So as you can see, they are exactly the same fit here. So this one, for some reason, has holes that are what do you call it? So it starts big here, and then if you look inside, the hole gets smaller. This one is just one size all the way through. I don't know why this one they make it bigger over here, but anyways, it ends up being the same size hole in both. The angle is also the same, so it should be a perfect fit. So it is facing the right way. This one here, I think it's called zinc cast. It's not the regular aluminum like this one. So, and this one is a lot heavier than that one, which I really like. So this one is, looks like it's a 4363A, is that right? Let me try to zoom in there. 4363AXX. Let me see if there are any other numbers here. Looks like that's the only number. The gasket looks like it's in great shape. I don't think this has ever been used. Well, looks like there was a little bit of gas in there, but now this one I really like, and I bought it specifically for this reason. It's got a, I don't know if this is cast or forged, but it's a steel part, and this other one is just a sheet. I know it's still pretty damn thick, and I don't think you could ever break it, but this one should be a lot stronger. Overall, this seems like a much better unit, much more heavier built unit. Now again, these can easily be rebuilt, but sometimes, in my case right now, it was just more convenient to just buy a new one. So yeah, there it is. So it actually says there, so somebody obviously wrote this by hand, so don't hold it against me if it's wrong, but it should be correct. It says 1956 Nash, that's the number there, 4363, so it matches what we saw on there. It's right on this part. So this one is a 3731S. And on the bottom there it says 1956 to 1959 American. Now, the engine for the American was the same from 56 to 63. The next engine came out in 1964, and that was the 232 inline 6. So I don't know why they say that, but this was probably made in, I guess, maybe 1959, so they didn't know what if it would fit the next years. I don't know, that's a hypothesis. Now this one I'm not being able to test it on video because it's requiring a lot more force to move than this one. This one actually sounds more like a frog too. Oh, there you go. But it's requiring a lot of force, but it is working now. I don't know if that excessive force is normal or not, but it is working. And this one, y'all have a little bit of a spot there where there's no pumping action, like a bit of play. This one seems to have a bit more than that one. Now, if you hold your finger over it when you're testing this, I don't think I mentioned this in the previous video. If you're holding your finger over it as to block the pressure, and you keep pumping this, it will not build up pressure. It will stop. At one point, it will just stop. You'll just keep moving it, and you won't hear the pumping sound. Now, that's normal. It's supposed to work that way. So what happens is, as soon as the carburetor gets enough fuel and it closes that valve, unlike a modern car with an electrical pump that needs a fuel return, this here just keeps moving, but it actually doesn't do any more pumping. If it just kept pumping, then you get like 400 psi of pressure, and you'd burst the fuel lines would actually blow up, right? So it's just normal. As soon as these things are only designed, the manual says they shouldn't go over 5.5 psi. So it's not a lot of pressure at all. It's just a little bit. So again, if the pressure were to be too high, it would also flood the carburetor, which can sometimes happen. I'm a bit weary with this one that it might, because it requires so much force, it might actually be pumping with a lot of force. So the pressure might be higher. I'm not sure. I will have to get a gauge for it. But it's a very well-built unit. I would like to get something like this in cast iron, though. That would be amazing. And if one day I have the chance, I will get these cast in iron or steel, cast steel or cast iron. But even so, it's a very, very heavy, well-built unit. They're all. This one is also a Carter, by the way. I think. Okay, maybe not. Maybe it's doesn't say Carter on it. Huh? It's got no manufacturer stamping. I think it might be an Autolite. I'm not too sure. I might have. If anybody needs that information, just ask. But again, I've seen a lot of these. These were actually, I think, these are the cheapest ones I found on eBay. But there was a lot more of them, so I just decided to grab them. Oh yes, one last thing. There's one thing that I don't like about this one. So right here, you can see this is the end of a shaft where this here pivots around. So it goes from there all the way to the other side. Now if you look on the other side, it doesn't go all the way through. And over here, if you actually look closely, you'll see that there's part of the aluminum casting that actually goes around the shaft, so that this is pretty much impossible to remove. If I ever wanted to remove this shaft, I'd have to grind this off and somehow be able to pull it through on this side, or grind off on the other side and push it out through here. This is a very bad design, but I don't think this shaft should ever... You probably won't ever have to replace it in a lifetime. Now, the one that I did have before, it did have a little bit more play up and down. So it did actually wear out around the shaft here a little bit. But I don't think it wore out the shaft, rather it wore out this part here. So again, this is another advantage of this here. It's probably impossible to wear this out. But this one, the shaft actually goes all the way through to the other side, so that I could actually just remove this little rivet here. I'll get a close up in a second, and just remove and replace the whole shaft if I wanted to, which is tempting for me because I kind of now want to remove this and put a stainless shaft or bolt with the nut on the end going through, but I might refrain myself from doing that. So once again, just so you can see, that one, it's kind of impossible to remove the shaft. So if one day this got wore out so much to the point where it broke off or just wore out too much, and I wanted to replace it, it would be a lot more difficult. Near probably technically impossible. Whereas this one, now I don't like this. The shaft is actually hollow and it's just punched so that it expands over this washer, and that holds it down. That holds it in place. Now over time, what's probably going to happen is this thing is going to rust away, and then the shaft might come off. And as you can see, you can actually see the other side of the shaft here. So it would be very, very easy to just remove this for Whatever reason, you know, you never know. Right? But I should get a really long life out of these parts anyways. So. These things are probably designed to last 100 years. I just want them to last 1,000. Now this one seems to have a few like steel parts going inside there. A few steel plates. 1, 2, 3. Would be nice to disassemble this, but I'm not gonna do that. It's very nice. It's like this is like I feel like a kid playing with Legos. So this one goes back in the box, and so does this one. I'll put this one in the car as soon as I can, so that I can get a better functioning wipers. And this one I'll keep in the trunk as a spare. There's a part number for that shaft there too. 59225. So 5592205. The only thing that I don't like about that one is that hole there is too big. It's a 3/8. I think it's not. It's a 5/16 bolt that's used here, and they've got that hole there, 3/8. I don't know why they do that. Just weaken the design. But still, look at the thickness of that, just so you have an idea. So, I don't think it'll break. All right, hope this helps someone.